For those of you who will remember the Monday Night Raw that preceded that promo, they did a vignette on Vince's plane with Mick Foley, where Mick Foley tore into Vince and Vince was just eating fruit and not paying attention to what Mick had to say. And Mick laid some pretty heavy on Vince, and Vince just blew it off and ignored him, in terms of, well, this is the way things are and I don't give a what your opinion is. And we were heading to SmackDown, and Michael Hayes, the fabulous Freebird, WWE Hall of Famer, I might add, and author of Bad Street USA, Nibes. Michael Hayes on the plane looked over at Vince and says, if you really want someone to do a shoot promo on you, Paulie over there rip your yay wide. And the alliance had just been such a unmitigated disaster for all of us involved. Both, again, I was on the writing team and on camera at the time. So on both ends of my career, it's just like, oh God, I wish this would just end already. And it was ending, and we were heading towards the conclusion, and Vince just looks, Vince is on the plane. And the funny thing was, just like with Mick Foley, he was legitimately just sitting there, eating fruit or something, just goes over and goes, want to rip me yay wide? And figuratively, not literally. And, it had been a while since I had done one of those ECW style shoot promos. Do you want me to rip you an asshole yay wide? As this guy over here found out, I'm the guy to do it. You want me to shoot? I'll shoot. Okay. How far can I go? As much as you can to draw me money. Okay. That I can do. That I can do. I can draw you money and rip you yay wide. Let's do it. And we got to SmackDown, and I knew I wanted to invoke the name of a bunch of the promoters that he ran out of business, and I knew I wanted to invoke the name of his father because I knew his father. I worked for his father. I was a teenage photographer that used to get paid for my pictures by Vince McMahon's father, and so I felt I had the right to invoke his father's name, which is a no-no unless you're going to say his name with reverence. We had done the angle where I turned Vince's children, and we've done it 100,000 times since, but this was I turned both of them on Vince at the same time. Where Stephanie comes out on TV and goes, I just want my father to die! And okay, so we're going with the death of the father at the behest of the daughter, with the endorsement of the son, and I said, okay, let's see how far I can take this. And the only thing that stuck in my head was sports entertainment versus wrestling. If I can just get that hook in, people will really go, Heyman is shooting on Vince McMahon. And so I came up with the line, you made wrestling a dirty word, didn't you, Vince? And I went, wow, that's the core. And as long as I can build this promo around that core, I have no idea what I'm going to say out there, but I know that's the message I want to send. That ECW and, WCW, the Alliance represents wrestling, and you scumbag, barrel-chested Irish you represent sports entertainment. You want superstars. We want wrestlers, and that's the core of it. So to his credit, I'll give him a ton of credit. I went up to Vince halfway through the day and I said, do you even want to know what I'm, some of the I want to say to you? And he went, no, draw me money, Okay, are you going to say anything back to me? No, just draw me money, And, we came up with the idea of Taz choking me out at the end, because Taz was no longer really in the ring, and he was sitting at the commentator table, and I just looked, and I just looked at him at the time as this big fat Butterball sitting with Michael Cole that used to be the toughest guy. Brother, I'll choke you out. I'm Taz, I'm from Brooklyn, you know? And now he's just, you know, and the line was, and now you've reduced him to being just a commentator and not a good one at that. You know? And then I just told Taz, I said, you know the cue, don't you? And he goes, no. I said, oh, you'll know it when I get to you. You know? And I said to him, listen, the cameras are going to be tight on us, bring that choke, man, tighten it up, bring it in. Oh, God, did he bring it? Oh, he jumped the shit out of me. And God bless him for doing it. So we were in Gorilla, and I was about to go out to cut the promo, and I looked over at Vince, who's eating a protein bar, and I said, hey, you sure you don't want to know anything I'm going to say here? Some of this shit's real heavy. Will it draw me money? Yeah. It'll get a lot of attention, Vince, that I promise you. It's the go-home show, goddammit. Bring it. Yes, sir, Captain. I'm on my way. And so I went out there, and for however many minutes it was, I laid into Vince McMahon in a shoot as I recommend anybody that ever wants to do a shoot promo, keep in mind the fact that shooting in and of itself is very Vince Russo. It does not work. No one here wants to just hear me shoot. I can shoot all night long, and you'll sit there and go, this is what who gives a shit? But if I can turn that shoot into storyline context and then manipulate what you're listening to into making you want to buy a ticket, to where I take that shoot and I make you say, he did make wrestling a dirty word. You know what? He did make superstars when I want to see wrestlers. He did do. F him, man. I'm going to buy that pay-per-view because I want those guys to win. Now that shoot draws money. So we took this realistic premise, which is known as a shoot, and we went as far as we could with the shoot comments, manipulated them into the storyline that we were presenting for that Sunday, and set forth a segment on SmackDown that to this day, as you just learned from Kenny, I still get asked all about because people still wonder, how was that planned? What did Vince know? How much was scripted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it still intrigues people to this day, which is the design of what they call the shoot promo. Shoot promos are not supposed to be, hey man, I know that your wife cheated on you and that your third kid ain't really your kid. And people at home go, I don't give a shit. I want to see two guys fight. But if you make that promo something that people can feel in their hearts, and it strikes their passion, the Bubba Ray Dudley always says, strike a chord, man. Strike a chord on somebody and you'll sell a ticket. You strike a chord, sell a ticket. And that's what we tried to do. And to Vince's credit, he took a ferocious promo said to his face with some I don't think a lot of people have ever said to him, and he took it so that he could draw money, and he didn't share a lot of that money with me when the buy rate came in, because in his mind he probably thought, oh, you got your payday by being able to say that to me. There was an incident on the airplane with me and Vince after the December to Dismember. The December to Dismember was the worst pay-per-view presentation I've ever had nightmares about. It sucked. The show just was a brutal abomination of the concept of wrestling, sports entertainment, pay-per-view television. The human existence was set back in time by how deplorable of a show this was. We were all together involved in a show that could not have been presented in a worst possible fashion, that if you wanted to sabotage your own business, your own legacy, your own wrestlers, your own cameramen, your own pay-per-view industry, a publicly traded company, and all those involved in it, you couldn't have written it this good to f yourself up. And the one that got dismembered in that December is the schmuck sitting in the chair right here. It just sucked. It was such a horrible show. And I was very pissed off about it, because most of the things that the public rebelled against this show were things that I were sending memos about, saying, we better not do this because of this. Please don't do this because of this. Let's not do this. Listen, this is just going to backfire. Let's not do this. And I had a concept that I was too passionate, admittedly, too passionate about, in which I either wanted, if Bobby Lashley were to become the champion, I wanted him to, relax, I wanted him to become the champion as a heel, in which we'd get to WrestleMania, and I wrote this out, by the way. I wrote out December to Dismember to WrestleMania. Bobby Lashley would end up in WrestleMania against Rob Van Dam against CM Punk. Three-way match. If they didn't like that pitch, I had a program from December to Dismember to WrestleMania, Bobby Lashley versus Rob Van Dam, and I had Bobby Lashley versus CM Punk. I had CM Punk versus Rob Van Dam with the winner facing Bobby Lashley. I had all these different scenarios. Okay, I also offered a way for Rob Van Dam to win the title, and he'd go to WrestleMania against Bobby Lashley, or he'd go to WrestleMania against CM Punk, or he'd go to WrestleMania against Bobby Lashley and CM Punk. And then I had the bright idea of pitching to Vince, why don't we have Punk, who's the new star that everybody seems to be rallying around, why don't we have Punk choke out the Big Show in the first 4 minutes of the match, so that now you know we're going to have a new World Heavyweight Champion in this match, and why don't we put the title on Punk, since everybody seems to be falling in love with this kid. And every one of the scenarios that I pitched, who was the first guy eliminated in that match? Punk. Who was the second? Van Dam. And it seemed awful spiteful to me. And Vince and I were butting heads, and I wanted out anyway. I couldn't stand what was being done to the version of ECW. I felt like I had whored out my own legacy. I didn't want to represent their version of ECW anymore. I just wanted to go home. And to be fair, Vince wanted me to go home too. And he sure made sure that I did. So what happened on that plane was, to avoid your question with all due respect, what happened on that plane was the culmination of me knowing Vince and Vince knowing me since I was 15 years old. He's never went public with what happened on that plane. And because it was between me and him, and by the way, there was no sex involved or anything like that. There's nothing salacious involved. Because, I mean, and no, I didn't kick his ass because I can't. And no, he didn't kick my ass because he didn't. But it was a very heated personal argument between the two of us once the plane landed and everybody else got off the plane. And it was time for me to go home. Now, as I told Steve Austin, there were two people in the company. You know, the old cowboy western Clint Eastwood, John Wayne thing. This town ain't big enough for the two of us. One is, you know, the New York Jew boy sitting in front of you, former owner of ECW, and the other was the majority owner, majority shareholder, chairman of the board, CEO, COO, head writer, and ultimate boss and god of his own universe, who owned at the time, I believe, 97.8% of the voting shares of the company. Now, I don't know how your math goes, and mine wasn't A+ in college, but it wasn't that far. But in my mathematical equation, if one of us is going to be shown the door, ain't gonna be him. So that was it. I was gone. I couldn't take it anymore. And I went home, and they were more than happy to send me home, by the way, especially after the things that I said to him on the plane. But I don't want to ever violate a confidence that I think remained between me and Vince, because we're the only two people on this planet who truly know what was said on that plane. And because of that, until he wants to go public with it, I don't want to.
The extreme style was always my favorite. Like I said, that's my best showcasing. I loved it when I came into WWE when I was representing ECW. That only went so far. I loved it when I had the hardcore title because that meant everything to me. And it was a joke before I got there. That meant the hardcore match meant they were going to go knock over the taco stand in the hallway or something, or use a plunger in the bathroom, or it was like silly stuff with Bob Holly, El Snow, whatever. But to me, that style I had all the respect for with what I did in ECW, being able to add that extreme element onto already really good wrestling, not taking the place of wrestling, but adding it onto it. And so I loved having the hardcore title. I made it mean so much. It went from a joke to a main event position. I was main eventing some live events as a hardcore champion. So what did they do? They retired the hardcore belt because it was meaning too much. It was never meant to. And somebody didn't want that to be a competition with the other belts that meant a lot more to the other wrestlers. And but that was always, anytime there's a ladder match, anytime you could throw the rule book out, to me that meant now it's time to be creative. Like when we had that Elimination Chamber match, it was the first of its kind. We just sat there all day looking at it, thinking, like, wow, what if I climb up there and jump? And it was, that's always been what I appreciated the most out of the business. I went to Vince and I said, Vince, what's the reason that you don't do an ECW pay-per-view that's like a reunion? Because, you got like so many of the roster, like you don't even have to bring anybody else in and, just have it be like ECW style. And he said, well, Rob, I think that's a great idea. And I thought for sure he was going to say, well, the reason I don't do that is because A, B, and C. He'd never thought of it. And he was like, I think I could make a lot of money with that. And I was just like, whoa, my emotional penis got hard. And so I hit him with a list. The next week, I went back to him with a big list. I said, dude, you know that all these guys that you have on your roster are former ECW? I said, look, and I went, Benoit and Jericho and the Dudleys and, this guy, that guy. And he was like, wow, I didn't realize that. And so, I told Paul right away what happened. And Paul was like, great, I'll stay on him from this end. And it was like, and Dreamer as well. But, after I planted that seed, Paul was the one in the office that was trying to keep him in line with all the crazy ideas they were having to completely obliterate what ECW was. And Paul would come to me and say, like, they got 10 stupid ideas. I think I can get 7 of them turned down, but we probably have to deal with 3 of them. It was like that.
And you were injured at the time that you were on the show. Was it important for you to be on the show even though you were injured?
It was my show. It was like, the reason I told Vince, let's do an ECW show is because I wanted to wrestle ECW style. I wanted to show my preferred artistic form to the millions of people that watch ECW, to everybody that no, to everybody that watched ECW and loved it, but to all the millions of people that watched WWE that might not have seen ECW or weren't used to it. So, I mean, me being a part of it was 100% part of the plan. So when I got injured and I had my knee surgery and then I couldn't be part of it, that was heartbreaking. So that was the first promo that anybody heard me do that was a shoot straight from the heart. You know, nobody had to okay that for the first time ever. I went out there and nobody knew what I was going to say. Although I did run some ideas by Edge, you know, does this sound all right? You know, some things I had in mind, but that was it. And, you know, I said, this hurts worse than missing WrestleMania. And that's how I felt at that time.
And then, from that, you end up. They bring back ECW the next year. Were you in agreement they should make ECW a brand and bring it back, or were you hesitant that if they?
No, dude, I was all for it. I thought, wait a second, if I can wrestle ECW style on WWE's stage on their spotlight, you just added 10 years to my career, and I had this match with Rey Mysterio. You guys might have seen that. It was SmackDown versus ECW prior to our third brand kicking off. This was like one of the introductory matches, and I was so happy. And everybody could tell, people that would watch the match were just like, you seem so happy again, just because I could bring the chair in and do my special moves, you know, like monkey flipping on the chair and skateboard kicking the chair into his face and all that stuff. I was just like, I just felt like I wasn't held back and forced to conform in such a way that it was really, you know, liberating. And when the third brand actually came out, I expected it to be like ECW, because Jim Ross would say when he was commentating, ECW means anything goes. And that's what it meant at first. But then after a while, it didn't mean that. You know, they added rules, and then and before that, they started polluting the talent pool by bringing in SmackDown guys and Raw guys to wrestle on ECW, which I didn't understand. I thought what would be cool is if ECW is a place to settle scores and you go there when you're really ready to brawl it out, that would be really cool, and you can keep it true to its nature. But to have the regular rules and have it no different than SmackDown or Raw, and you're bringing Matt Hardy and Kane and guys that aren't even ECW or going to be, but they're just on the card because you think ECW isn't going to draw enough attention. And that's what it was. That's what they thought. They thought we needed the help the whole time, and they didn't let us be true to ourselves. But, you know, sure enough, when they added the rules and all that, I knew they were done. And I told Vince, I said, no, you're killing it. That's what makes it different. And, you know, you got Raw and SmackDown. They have rules. This is, you know, Rob, my referees need credibility. All right, well, you're the boss. You know, I mean, what am I going to tell Vince? But obviously, the referees in ECW had no credibility. You know, everyone laughed, like, what are they even doing in there? Why are they even trying? Because they would try. They'd try and pull the chair away from you or whatever, but they were there to make the 3 count, and you know, and try and be reasonable, which was, you know, all of what the show was about.
And at One Night Stand 2006, you win the ECW title, you win the WWE title. Talk about that day, talk about that moment, and how much it meant to you.
Well, I didn't let myself truly believe it was going to happen until it actually happened, until I actually hit that frog splash, and then I was crawling over to him. I was pretty sure then, but once I covered him and got the 1, 2, 3, then that was definitely the highlight of my career, and not just because, you know, like I said, the titles didn't mean as much to me as they did to other wrestlers, although I knew that's the driver's seat. You got the WWE Championship, you're the guy, you're the man. I knew that. But I never let it go to my ego, you know, like the other guys do, where it's like, I drew this house tonight by myself. I mean, I don't get that. That's never going to be me. But although I just said earlier, all the ECW guys were chanting. But in fairness, that was like 1,000 people, not 50,000, all right? But what was I talking about?
Did it mean a lot to you when it finally happened?
No, but the point that I was trying to make, it did mean a lot. I was just saying not as much as everyone else. But for me, the reason that was so special was because the build-up for that match was my entire career up to that point. It was being hardcore. It was sticking to my guns. It was ignoring the right advice. It was remaining extreme when everybody else was always trying to change me. And that's what got me to that night where everybody was 100% behind me for what I believed in, because they all believed in the same. You know, we were like-minded, and there's never been a night truly like that one in my over 30 years of a career. There never will be. Everybody was all 100% not only for everything I stood for, but also against everything that the other guy stood for, which was shoved down their throat and forced as wrestling. And it was just like, it was so special that for me to go away the victor that night validated the previous 20 years or so of my career, and also validated what I'll be remembered for in the future's history.
And I mean, also that night, John Cena, when he came out, I mean, I assume he obviously knew he was going to get booed, but do you think, did he quite estimate how hated he was going to be that night?
He knew that he was in for a rough night. He knew that for sure, and he was looking forward to it. He thought it was going to be really fun, and I think he really enjoyed it. I don't know if anybody could have expected quite, quite to the level of passion that the Extreme fans have. And we had, the best of them gathered in one of our historic buildings that holds the energy like so good. I don't, who could have really known if he threw his shirt out, someone was gonna wipe his ass with it and throw it back, Yeah, but he knew that he was gonna be getting booed, and that's not even the first time I'd seen him get booed. But he's a professional. In Wales, in Cardiff, I saw it one time, like everybody booed him. He got on the mic and he said, that's so great that you guys are reacting. It'd be horrible if nobody was making any noise, but at least I know you're having a good time, and that's what we're here for. And let me hear it for you. You can't see me. Everybody just like boom. All of a sudden, he just turned him around and everybody left him.
Raven was a top guy. Raven was. Honestly, and I actually read for the first time what Raven wrote in the program. I just read it backstage and was moved a lot by it. Raven should never have left ECW. He put himself in the hands of the wrong people. He put himself in the hands of people that had no vision for that character. So I think he'd be the first one to tell you that, that at a time when we were about to experience potentially the greatest growth because we just found pay-per-view, the guy who could have become the face of the brand because he was such an upstart, such a revolutionary, such a well-played character that he just put himself in the hands of people that just didn't give a about who the soul of Raven was, and I loved that character as much as I did any other character in ECW. Scott Levy portrayed that character like nobody else ever could. The character of Raven was invented by two people. Scott Levy had this concept, and he pitched it to one person who was obsessed with pop culture and the music revolution and the hip hop revolution, and not that Raven was hip hop, but his character was this angst. See, here's the magic of Raven. The magic of Raven was that he was a sympathetic character who deserved no sympathy. He was beaten by his drunken father, but you didn't feel bad for him. He came from a broken home, of which a lot of people could identify with, but nobody could identify with him. Why? Because he was such a great heel that and what a performer, by the way, at that time, that nobody cheered him. that in front of the smartest audience in the world at the time, he could outsmart them on a nightly basis. It wasn't the 50-50 thing that you see now where people go, yeah, he's a heel, but I respect his work. Oh, he's a heel, but he's a great worker. People hated Raven. They paid to see him lose. They paid to see him get his ass kicked. People paid for 2.5 years waiting for Tommy Dreamer to finally get that first victory over Raven. Why? Because of the brilliance of Scott Levy's performance. No one outside of two people, Scott Levy and Paul Heyman, understood that, because we had the privilege, again that word, and the blessing of creating that character together. Now when you hand that over to an Eric Bischoff on Eric's best day at his brightest. No, I'm not knocking him on this. Anybody on their best, anybody in here on your best day, on your brightest, won't be able to tap into the soul of that character because you didn't create it. Because you weren't there when we sat there for days on end and said, who is this guy? What's his history? What's his story? When do we reveal that his father was a drunk? When do we talk about the beatings he suffered as a child? How many weeks in, how many years into the story do we reveal that? And if you're not part of that process, how can you possibly then be within the soul of the character? If you and you, any of you sat in a room and created a character and let it play out on television, where this character evolves and this character has all these layers, and then you hand the character to me after 4 years and say, run with it. I can't. I'm going to have to change this character by giving him part of a vision that I will see, because I wasn't in those discussions where you very carefully decided what day this new layer gets peeled back. Eric Bischoff could never have booked Raven properly because he didn't understand the soul of Raven. Vince McMahon could not have written for Raven properly because he didn't understand the soul of Raven. And Scott Levy was so inside the soul of Raven that when you tried to get this character to go in a different direction, it didn't make sense to Scott Levy anymore, because inside his heart was the blood of Raven. I can't say that Raven didn't have a chance at being the main event. He did. He went for what he found to be a much greater opportunity in WCW. Financially it was, but in terms of the development of that character, it wasn't, okay? Who never had a shot on top? I'll give you a different answer, okay? I'll give you one that doesn't truly answer your question, but addresses it. Who should have been a much bigger star than they were? Sabu. And a lot of that, much like Shane Douglas, and Sabu will be the first one to confess to this, was self-inflicted, but by the time Sabu had an opportunity to perform in front of a much bigger audience than ECW could present to him, Sabu had destroyed his own body, both in the ring and with out-of-ring activities, and the world never got a chance to really see the best of Sabu unless you either A, have videotapes from 1993, 1994, the beginning of 1995, or and I'm not plugging the WWE network, but if you happen to get it and they have those shows on it and Sabu's on those shows, you can see him at his best. Or on any other, YouTube, whichever method you choose. Sabu in that era was revolutionary. He was ahead of his. That's the thing about being ahead of your time. You don't make the money that other people will, stealing all of your. In which case, ECW, bankrupt, Attitude Era, billionaires. So. Sabu falls into that. Sabu had the right, or should have gone down in history as truly one of the most influential, one of the most groundbreaking superstars ever. And I don't think that'll be his legacy, though. And again, he has to take some of the blame for this, but that's the answer. Of all the people that I've seen in the past 30 years, who deserved more than he ended up with, Sabu.
At that point in my career in 2001, I'd been wrestling, since my first matches in '90. And I looked at WWE as selling out, like we were in ECW, we were insulted by the way they would copy our products, our specific things that we did on our show, but they would water them down. You know what I mean? Like put mattresses, for them to land on when they're taking a bump off the stage. We didn't do that. We had tables and cement, and that was part of what we were. And, we never heard of gimmicking a table or a chair so it falls apart. The fans would hand us their chairs, and they knew they were real. And so I really looked at it like it was selling out. But in 2001, if I wanted to continue being a professional wrestler on TV in the United States, there was no other option. So WWE had bought everybody up, and Paul had been there for a while, and I knew that he really had to swallow some pride to go there. And I kind of got over that enough to figure, well, he's got to do what he's got to do. Anybody does. And they were the only ones left, and I thought at that point, that when I was ready, I had the offers waiting for me. There was open door for me. And when I was ready, I called Paul and say, yeah, I'm ready to talk to the guys in WWE. And he said, okay, great. I had to meet JR at the Marriott by the LAX because I had a reputation for being hard to get along with. And that's because when we did the invasion angle in '97, when I didn't like what was going on, I split and I pulled us all out of there. And that's a different story, answer to a different question. But because that happened, I had to meet with JR. Everything went well. And, I signed a contract and came in, and it was like the first night at WWE, I thought, they're going to erase my history, call me Robin Van Dam. I'm going to be a bird or something, and Robber Van Dam, have a bank robber mask or something, and then I saw Tommy Dreamer, and I was like, Tommy, what are you doing here? And he threw me an ECW shirt, and I was like, what? And I was like, I couldn't have been happier because I had no idea that they even were doing the alliance, that I was part of it. And then to represent ECW and not bury my past, but add depth to it, I was all for it. So I was stoked.
And then when you get there, because you've been in ECW with kind of your friends and you've known the environment, how quickly did you realize when you got to WWE that it's more political, and how did you navigate that?
It didn't take long. It was right away. And it drove me nuts, and I never did feel comfortable there like I did in ECW. The whole time I was there, for one, they I think this is probably something that nobody is excluded from. There's always exceptions, but probably they make a lot of promises they don't keep. So that's enough to drive anybody frustrated. I think that happens to everybody because there's so many agents. They meet 3 times a day trying to figure out what to do. This guy's pulling for his guys. This guy's pulling for his guys, And so that was going on. Paul's trying to say, yeah, we need someone in the main event. We should put RVD in there. And then somebody in the office is saying, no, let's put somebody else. I think this guy would be a better guy. And that's I'm hearing all this that's going on in all the meetings. But besides that, what would drive me nuts, I told you how I got there, right? I told you the path I went. Who do you give credit to? JR or Paul? It shouldn't matter, but it does. And these guys would argue about it, and they would be like playing tug of war with me. Like my first few days there, like it was just crazy. Like JR would be like, hey, I got you that extra money you were talking about. I bet your buddy from Philadelphia don't do that for you, does he? And then Paul would say something, just as ridiculous, about, is he telling you that he's trying to get you in that match? Don't do, and it was just like, are you guys for real right now? Like, dude, I'm here to do kicks and flips and.
First of all, a lesson for everyone to learn. If you want to learn it now, please do. If you haven't learned it, here it is. If you choose not to learn it, I guarantee you sometime in your life you will. I had to learn this lesson in my life. You got to move forward. That's it. Bingo. Sharks move forward. That's why sharks dominate the ocean. Why? Because sharks never go backwards. They never go sideways. Sharks only go forward. And that's a lesson in life to learn, because they are the rulers of the sea and of the ocean. You can't change the past. As much as you may want to, as much as in 2001 I wanted to sit there and resurrect ECW and try to save ECW and tried to bring back ECW, there was no way to do it. I couldn't do it. We lost distribution, and when you lose distribution, you will lose finance, and when you lose distribution and finance, you end up losing content. It's over. It's done. It's finished. My dad died in 2013. My father was my best friend. I miss my father every single day of my life. I cry at least once a day because when I see my children, I wish my father could see my children. I wish my children could see my father. Guess what? He ain't coming back. I can't bring him back. There's no way, not even for one moment, not even for one conversation, not even for one hug. The man's not coming back, even with Jesus in the room. He's just not coming back. That's it. I have to move forward in my life. I have to tell my children more about my father. I have to tell the world about what a great man my dad was. But I'm never going to have him back. I hit the microphone. Guess what? I can't take that back. I hit it again. Now, I can endeavor never to hit a microphone again, but I can't take back the fact that I hit the microphone twice. This applies in life. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2001, ECW went out of business. It's a shame. It's the It broke my heart. It tore me up. And yet the next morning, I still woke up and I had to deal with the world. So what do? I went on with my life, and I had 7.5 years of the greatest experience I've ever had behind me, and to embrace and to remember and to celebrate. But there was no way to bring it back. So what do? I move forward and I try to carve a different legacy, a better legacy, a bigger legacy, or a different legacy. But that's it. Tomorrow, I hope, is better than today. And the day after tomorrow, I hope, is better than tomorrow. But that's it. You have to move forward. Now, I go to WWE, then WWF. And I'm trying to move forward, and I'm trying to become a color commentator with Jim Ross, who is the single greatest talker in the history of this industry. And they bring in the WCW invasion. Now, on a worldwide basis, based on Ted Turner's hundreds of millions of dollars, the WCW brand name was much bigger than the ECW brand name. The only problem is that in 2001, only a few months out of business, the public remembered what a god-awful product WCW was. Please repeat that to Eric Bischoff when you see him. The public also remembered ECW was the balls, man. We were the bomb. We were the best thing people had ever seen up till 2001. So the WCW invasion failed miserably. What did they do? Let's tag in ECW. So I had been trying to get guys in ECW a job. I wanted to bring in Tommy Dreamer. I wanted to bring in Joey Styles. I wanted to bring in, Taz was already there. I wanted to bring in Rob Van Dam. Hey, Rob Van Dam. Okay. I wanted to bring in Sabu. I kind of thought about bringing in New Jack, but there were an awful lot of white people in WWE for him to stab. I wanted to bring in the Sandman at least, so maybe I get his music to play, at least one time, and everybody can experience that and see what the ECW experience was about. I wanted to bring in Kid Cash. I wanted to bring in Tajiri. I wanted to bring in Spike Dudley. I wanted to bring in Super Crazy. A lot of people I wanted to bring in from ECW. So when they came to me and they said, we're going to do this ECW and add ECW to WCW, and the alliance idea, but still, let's bring in ECW. At least I realized there are a lot of people that I could now get in that I wasn't able to get in before, and that was very intriguing to me, because even if the alliance didn't make it, WWE fans would get their taste of Rob Van Dam, or maybe Sabu, or Joey Styles, or Tommy Dreamer, or the Sandman, or any of these people that truly deserve to play on a global platform.